Well, I'm looking forward to 2024. Unfortunately, some tough news for Missouri fans dropped last night about 2025. Let's talk about it and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I want to talk about a Florida-based defensive back, true freshman for Missouri, getting a ton of hype already from his teammates here during fall camp. Also a new game on the 2025 schedule. Before I start the program, I'll remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. Well, the sports calendar starts thinning out a bit, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone all day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And unfortunately, I got to start with some bad news. Jayvan Boggs, 2025 receiver, top 100 player, basically consensus, I believe, out there. Well, committed to Missouri not too long ago after decommitting from Ohio State as a wide receiver from Cocoa, Florida. And now he's decommitted to Missouri now and has gone with UCF, with Central Florida, one of the last two teams, along with Missouri, that Boggs was considering just about a month ago when he announced originally that he was committing to the Missouri Tigers. So a good reminder here that while all of us are excited about this Missouri recruiting class of 2025, well, none of it's official yet until the ink is dried. And even in this world of free transfers, basically, in the portal era and all that good stuff, and name, image, and likeness probably factored into this Boggs decision as well. Well, just expect anything is possible at this point in college football, I would say. Really, it's obviously not completely surprising or anything that Missouri fans should be terribly upset about when an oral commitment flips and then decides to go to another school. Of course, Missouri has been the beneficiary of that several times. Notably, Luther Burden was originally committed to Oklahoma before flipping and going to Missouri. What's really surprising to me, at least, about the Boggs situation is, generally speaking, when a prominent player in particular commits to a big school like Ohio State or Oklahoma and they decide to flip somewhere else, well, generally they stick with that. The second flip, that's a little bit surprising. But again, in this new world that we live in, I'd say perhaps something I talked about a couple months ago when I was appropriately in Destin, Florida, recording the podcast, is the new Florida NIL laws, which apply to high school football players in the state, similar to what Missouri had done previously. Missouri has been sort of ahead of the curve in a lot of ways there, but you got to wonder if, hey, maybe there was a late game sort of NIL offer that came in, maybe an offer that was a little bit too good for Jayvan Boggs to refuse. Again, either way, while this is certainly a bummer for Missouri fans, we really don't have any reason to complain and act like Jayvan Boggs is now somehow a lesser person or something like that. Even though the indications are that the Missouri coaching staff, well, they found out about it on social media just like Missouri fans did last night. So, that's a little bit disappointing, of course, but I think Oklahoma fans and coaches had similar complaints about Caden Green when he left Oklahoma, came to Missouri, didn't exactly, call everybody on the team and say, hey, guys, I'm leaving. It was just more like you announce it on social media, see you later type of deal. So, again, Missouri fans don't have a lot of room to complain here, in my opinion. But from a Missouri fan's perspective, obviously losing out on Boggs here, at least for now, right? Who knows? He could flip back. Who the heck knows at this point? No, I consider that extremely unlikely at this point. And certainly it's a blow to the Missouri recruiting class. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that. But having said all that, I will say if at any position, really, Missouri probably could have standed a blow at wide receiver. Obviously, the Tigers are fine this season. This doesn't affect this season. But even in 2025, I think the Missouri wide receiver room is pretty full of a lot of really talented guys, including Josh Manning, Mekhi Miller, Daniel Blood, the freshmen like Courtney Crutchfield, James Madison, and of course, Donovan Olubade, the other Florida product, not a true freshman. He's going to be a senior in high school here coming up in just a little bit. Same class as Jayvan Boggs, another top 100 type player. You know, who knows? Maybe Boggs just thought the wide receiver room was getting a little bit crowded. Who the heck knows what came in to his decision-making there? Maybe we'll find out someday. But regardless, hey, you just kind of got to move on at this point. This is college football, so in 2024. So nothing to really complain about. Definitely a bummer if you're a Missouri fan. But again, if there was one position group that Missouri could have stood a blow in the 2025 class, it probably is at receiver. Again, if you think about Matt Zollers, for example, if he would have decommitted and gone to Georgia or Penn State or whatever, that would have been a real serious blow at this point in the process. Missouri would have been kind of behind the eight ball, scrambling to maybe search for a new quarterback. You know, that would have been a huge bummer. Even offensive line, I think Missouri could have probably stood a blow. But again, anytime you lose a four-star player, top 100 guy, not a great day. No question about that. Now, I've mentioned that in fall camp so far, the Missouri beat has been able to talk to a much more of a variety of players than they have in the past, although true freshmen are not going to be part of the mix there. But the veteran players, and including the new veteran players like Zion Young and Toriano Pride and others, have really had a lot of nice words and praise thrown Cameron Keyes' way, the true freshman defensive back from the state of Florida. I thought that was interesting because not only were multiple players singing the praise of Keyes, especially his physicality as a true freshman, something you don't always see at this point, especially early in fall camp. He was really laying the wood a couple times there, according to reports. But our own Brian Smith here at the Locked On Podcast Network, our chief scouting director. I call him the scout master. Let's just stick with that. But Brian, a frequent guest on this podcast, really brought up Cameron Keyes kind of out of nowhere, unprompted by me for sure, as somebody that, hey, he's kind of flying under the radar. And Brian definitely knows high school football. And he in particular knows the state of Florida. So the fact that Cameron Keyes is kind of starting to maybe prove Brian right a little bit already, at least if you're listening to the Missouri veterans who we've gotten to hear from, I don't know, he's going to be an interesting guy to watch, somebody who may well get some action as a true freshman. And after my most recent episode where I talked about some players that may be on the transfer portal radar after this season, depending on how things played out, I called it Make or Portal. That was my deal. Well, I had at least one listener that maybe thought I was stepped out of bounds with that whole segment in general. Well, honestly, the thing mentioning those players, number one, not supposed to be a pejorative. So let's talk more about those Make or Portal players here in just a little bit, and I will defend my own honor. I'll tell you that right now. But coming up here in just a little bit, we'll do that. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel, because obviously this time of year, the sports calendar is not quite as thick as we're going to get here when the football season starts. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And thanks, as always, for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. For your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On College Football, especially if you love this format. You'll get exactly this, but the national perspective. Again, Locked On College Football, available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And again, my previous show where I talked about some potential Missouri Tigers that it could be a make or portal type season. Well, I had one listener who was not a huge fan of that particular segment. He says, I don't really see the point in trying to predict who will end up in the portal after the next season if they don't contribute now. I get there's a new reality to college football, but it just seems like, I don't know, some of these guys are only 19, 20 years old. Can't we just let them have their experience and see if they develop more before sounding like we're making that decision for them? It's going to happen regardless of what fans and media have to say. But for me, it just takes a little bit more of the fun out of being a fan, kind of like advanced metrics in sports, but I digress. Just wanted to share one fan's thoughts. Respectfully, Steven in DFW. Well, first of all, Steven, thanks for listening here for the past a few months. Welcome to the program. And I got to say, I agree with some of the spirit of your email for sure, for the idea that, hey, these guys are only 19 or 20 years old. Can't we just let them have their experiences and all that kind of stuff? Well, first of all, Steven, I never wanted it to seem like I was pushing any of these players out the door. This wasn't meant to be a pejorative. For example, when I brought up Daniel Blood and Mekhi Miller, that isn't because I don't like them as players. No, it's quite the opposite. And in fact, it wasn't meant to be a pejorative at either one of those guys. I'm simply just looking at patterns, looking at, well, hey, if these guys are going to be big contributors this season, then yeah, they'll probably stick around. If they aren't, well, now you've aged a little bit in college football here. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world if one of those guys goes to Baylor or something and blossoms as a player. See, that would be a good thing for them, first of all. Again, all the players that I mentioned in that Maker Portal segment are guys that I do think have talent that maybe has not been fully realized at Missouri just yet. As a Missouri fan, I absolutely hope every single one of those guys does realize their talent in a Missouri uniform. Obviously, that would be great for us. But the reality is we are in a new reality, and if there was no transfer portal, hey, that would be fine by me. I liked the old days too, and by the old days, I mean 3-4 years ago or something, when guys for the most part, 90% of the players when they signed with Missouri, they'd end up graduating there. Whether they were disappointing as a player, whether they had lived up to their high school ranking or had surpassed it. Maybe they were underdogs that had gone way past it. Either way, you sort of felt like you got to know a lot higher the percentage of the team, all that good stuff. But again, my point here was not to say, well, these guys just aren't very good and they aren't leaving it and we should get them off the roster. That's not really what I'm saying. And as for the thing of, these 19, 20-year-old kids, I do try to be sensitive to that. I really do. But let's keep in mind, it's not these type of players who are getting hate online. The guys who don't play a ton, those aren't the ones who are getting criticized. For example, Brady Cook he felt the hate after the 2022 season when he was the Missouri starting quarterback. When Brady was on the team in 2020 and 2021 and backing up Connor Bazelak, there was nobody who was throwing any criticisms Brady Cook's way. If anything, there were probably some people who would have liked to have seen Brady Cook get a start against Georgia, for example. It's that whole thing of, well, the backup quarterback is often, the most popular guy on the team. And by the way, to your point of, hey, let these guys have their own experiences, if there are guys on the team who, for whatever reason, they just never really play whatsoever, and they decide to stay all 4 years at Missouri for personal reasons. Maybe they just love Missouri. They love the experience. They have a girlfriend that they want to hang around with. Whatever it is, great. I'm not trying to push anybody out the door whatsoever. But again, I'm just trying to identify players that I do think were talented on the Missouri roster that, because they're talented, if they don't have a clear path to playing time at some point this season, it may not be there next season either. So it may be best for them to find a new landing spot. I'm not trying to push anybody out the door. Again, more just trying to recognize patterns here. And much has already been made about Missouri taking another trip to the great state of Massachusetts, as Eli Drinkwitz famously said a few years ago. Of course, the Tigers going to be traveling to Amherst to play UMass this October. And yes, a very strange road trip, no question about that. But the Tigers going to be making it anyway. However, a game with Miami of Ohio, another road trip for next season, well, that was bought out by Missouri. We know that for sure, and we also know that that game has been replaced. Central Arkansas will now be a Missouri opponent next season. That'll be 4 non-conference home games for the Tigers in 2025. So, hey, an extra home game, that'll be kind of nice if you're a season ticket holder, I suppose. Not exactly a marquee game against Central Arkansas, but hey, that is what it is. And there's your update from courtesy of Eli Hoff at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who first had that report. And there are just indeed tons of signs that we just keep creeping closer and closer to the start of football season. It appears the new video board in the north end zone is nearly complete, looked to be operational a couple of days ago. When I drove by, also some pictures out on social media as well appear to be showing the new video board just about to be up and running and complete, it would seem to me. So things progressing well there. Also, a Missouri fan night and open practice on August the 17th at 7 o'clock, followed by then a screening of the movie Zootopia, by the way, at 8:30. If you're interested in that, by the way, August 17th, free and open to all Missouri football fans. And also another sign we're getting closer. I probably should have mentioned this in my FanDuel Sportsbook read, quite honestly, but we do have a week 1 opening line, Tigers minus 47.5 against Murray State at FanDuel Sportsbook with a 58.5 total for your over-under there. So again, 47.5. Surprising, honestly, to see a line that early against an FCS team, but I guess for week 1, Thursday night football game, FanDuel Sportsbook clearly wants our action. No question about that. And you know what? I just might have to give it to him. And by the way, speaking of action, some good action at the Olympics yesterday. And I have to say it was really impressive once again to see Karissa Schweizer, the Missouri great, back in the Olympics. You know, frankly, it's one thing, I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's one thing after you've had a college career of being a runner to qualify for the Olympics is incredibly impressive in itself. I think it's even more impressive to then come back and do it again 3-4 years later, especially with that sort of singular and boring, in my opinion, of an endeavor, which is long distance running. That sport seems like punishment to me, but obviously Karissa Schweizer is made out of different stuff than I am. To come back, again, make the Olympics. She was the highest finishing American in the 5K yesterday, finishing 10th overall in the world. So what an impressive athlete. And congratulations to her, and again, on making it back and making the final, being the highest finishing American. She definitely did all us true sons and daughters proud. She certainly is a true daughter herself. By the way, have you noticed Devin Booker wearing his dad Melvin's number 15, his Mizzou number 15? Well, Devin wearing that number for Team USA this tournament with in the Olympics here. And by the way, that made me think of something. Also, Devin Booker, a guy who was part of a Kentucky team that basically did hockey substitutions. Well, Team USA doing some hockey subs of their own in this Olympic tournament. And I got to say, with Dennis Gates' penchant for playing a ton of guys. What would that look like for Mizzou? Let's think about that here in just a little bit. First, though, let's talk about eBay Motors, where passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships for your ride or die vehicle. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge victories. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So to all you current Mizzou fans, or students, I should say, all you younger Missouri fans out there, if you've never seen Devin Booker play basketball and you really are appreciative of basketball, just fire up an old Mizzou game sometime. I promise you, that guy is not overhyped. I actually think if Melvin were around in today's type of basketball, I think he would have had a pretty long and productive NBA career. But obviously his son, Devin, is an all-star level player, and I thought it was always interesting on that, gosh, was it 2015 now? I believe that was the Kentucky team that lost one game the entire season, I believe, in the Final Four, but had basically been doing hockey subs. In other words, take all 5 guys off the court for a new 5. And I think I kind of like that more than you would think. Now, obviously, you need the depth to do it, and few have that kind of depth. Obviously, Team USA is spoiled in terms of talent. But for Dennis Gates, I actually think for this coming season, that is something to look at. If you truly want to play 10 guys, it may not be the worst idea in the world to have 5 guys who play together all the time, get used to each other's tendencies, all that good stuff, and then have a second 5 guys that come in and do basically the same thing. Now, what I'm saying here, obviously you don't want to just have, hey, your starters play 20 minutes and then the second 5 also plays 20 minutes. It's not going to be equal. And then at a certain point, there's going to be certain guys who are a little off, that type of thing, different matchups. As you close the game, yes, you intermingle your best 5 that's maybe working for that particular game. Again, all of this is a little bit, it's not a usual strategy. It's a little bit unconventional for sure. But I think the idea that it didn't work for Kentucky simply because they didn't win the national championship that year, well, I would argue against that a little bit. And the fact that you did have a bunch of future NBA players on that team, like I believe Devin Booker, well, definitely Devin Booker, I believe Karl Anthony Towns, among others. And, it seemed to work for them, is what I'm saying. So, again, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's something you probably do more in the first half than the second half. But if Dennis Gates is really married to that idea, I think you have enough of a variety of big men, guards, lead ball handlers, wings, all that kind of good stuff that you could maybe make it work, at least for the first 10, 15 minutes of the game. That could be your first substitution instead of just constantly bringing 1 or 2 guys in and off the floor at every break. Something to think about. And thank you for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen today. Now, once again, check out Locked On College Football. From NIL to never-ending conference realignment, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to do the search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.